There she is.
After Bill, I may be a bold leader. Okay, will do, sorry. I'm a little bit shorter. Is that okay? Is that better? Okay, good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for asking me to speak today. You know, when I joined Rotary 15 years ago, I had a left hand. And many of you haven't known me any other way. Some of you did. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my experience today and explain why I'm really thankful to be alive. So some of this you may find sad. You're going to find some of it humorous. It's okay to laugh or cry, whatever works. Because even in times of adversity, sometimes there's some humor in it. So how many of you remember what you were doing on April 25th, 1999? I will remember that forever. It was a Sunday, and the weather was absolutely gorgeous. It was one of those April days when it had the promise of summer. And it was a Sunday, and my husband at the time said, you know, why don't we just take a ride? We have this CJ5 that we had restored over the winter, and let's just take a ride up Mines Road and just look around. So we did that. And we spent the day out kind of tooling around, and on the way back, we were coming back on Tesla Road. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and as we were crossing over Roos Road, a motorist kind of turned in front of us, and so to avoid a collision, my husband, you know, turned the wheel really sharp, and the CJ5, those of you who don't know this, they don't handle well at all, and so we hit the embankment, and the Jeep started to roll, and you know, what I want to do now is read this part because it's what I remember happening at the time. So I closed my eyes, and I remember thinking that I should really try to relax my body to reduce whatever injuries might occur. I knew we were in trouble. And it seemed like a really long time until the Jeep came to a rest. And it did come to a rest upright, which was good. And it probably only took a few seconds. But in that time, I could hear, you know, glass breaking and steel moaning. You know, it was, sorry, but it was being twisted in ways it wasn't intended to be. And then there was silence. And the Jeep had landed upright, and so, you know, we sat there, and my husband looked at me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I think so. You know, my arm hurts and I can't really move it." And so he looked down and he said, "Oh, that's not good." So he came around the other side of the Jeep and he started to apply pressure to the arm. And no, I never saw it, so that I couldn't lift my arm or anything, and I had a long shirt on, so I didn't really see what was happening. And so by this time, you know, people were starting to come up behind us and asking if they could help. And he said, "Yeah, you know, somebody call 911, and the labs, the Lawrence Livermore Labs emergency techs were the first to arrive, and they did a great job. You know, they take over the scene and start applying first aid, and they're asking me, you know, what's your name, how old are you? You know, I really resented that. But because they ask you over and over again, of course they're doing that because they're worried about you going into shock. But at the time I was just annoyed. But they asked me how I was doing. I said, "I think I'm okay. You know, my back kind of hurts. I'd like to be able to get out of the Jeep and just stretch." "No, don't move." So they put a neck brace on me and put me on a gurney and started taking care of me. And I have to tell you, they started cutting off my clothes right there. We're on Tesla Road, I'm on a gurney, and they're cutting off my clothes, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm so glad I have clean underwear on. and I don't have any holes in my socks. And I know you guys are thinking I made that up, but I'm not. I swear to God, that's what I was thinking. And I thought my mother would be so proud. And of course, you know, by this time, they're taking care of me, and I hear them order a helicopter. And so, you know I'm in big trouble. So the helicopter comes, and they have me all bundled up, and they actually put you through the cone of the helicopter. So the cone opens up, and then they put you through the front. And I'm laying there, and there are two co-pilot, or a pilot and a co-pilot, and I'm thinking, this is my first ride in a helicopter, and I don't get to look out the window, so I'm kind of disappointed. But at that point, I did pray, and I asked God to save my arm. And off we went, and they took me to Eden. That was the closest trauma center, and you know, they got me into the ER and started doing an examination of my injuries. And I know I went through a series of x-rays, but it's kind of interesting because you're just laying there, and I think the x-rays must be coming from the ceiling because I don't remember being taken anywhere at the x-ray. But in a few minutes, they're putting the x-rays up on the wall, and I can see the image of my hand and my arm, and you can tell I have a really bad compound fracture. There's a bone sticking out in the wrong direction, but I can still see the hand. And one of the doctors is asking me, they have it kind of behind, the arm's up, and they kind of have it behind the sheet because they don't want me to see it. And they say, you know, can you feel this? Can you move your fingers? And it's so numb. I said, I think so, I'm not sure. And so they're talking among themselves, and they're trying to figure out whether to send me to Stanford or to the California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco, because they're going to send me to a microsurgery team. And so by that time, my husband arrives, and they're telling him that they're going to take me by ambulance to San Francisco. And he says, well, you know, what about the blood on the pillow? And the doctor's like, oh, she's got her head's cut. So they shave my head, and they stitch it up, and then they've got to have a CAT scan because they want to make sure there's no more damage. And so they rush that because the ambulance is waiting. Anyway, off we go, and we go by siren to San Francisco. Again, I can't look out the windows because I'm on the gurney. And so I didn't get to see us go over the bridge or anything. But I do remember, you know, when I'm going over the bridge, I can hear the sound of it, clack, 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 you know, as you're going across. Get to the hospital, and they're pulling together the microsurgery team, and they come up, and I remember Dr. Brooks, he was going to be the lead surgeon, and he said, because you know the arm is all bandaged, he can't see anything, and he says, you know, I understand you've been hurt really bad. And he said, you know, we don't believe in amputation here, so we're going to take care of you. And I said, and I know by this time I've been on a lot of morphine, but amputation, nobody has said anything about amputation. So, oh good, I'm glad, I don't believe in anything. So, I'm in surgery, and my family is waiting in the waiting room, and apparently, I don't know this, but the doctor goes out and says, you know, we're going to have to amputate. And my husband says, oh no, you told her you weren't going to amputate. So you'll need to wake her up and ask her. And he says, well, no, you know, there's no use trying to save it. It's really very damaged, and it won't be of any use to her, leave the hand attached. And so he says, oh no, you have to wake her up because you told her. And so finally my brother steps up and says, you know, they're not asking permission, they're just telling you what's going to happen. And the doctor said, that's right. And so, you know, the next thing I know, I'm waking up in the CCU, and I'm very foggy. But there's people around me, and the nurse says, oh, she's waking up. And she leans in and says, you know, I'm sorry, Lori, we had to amputate. And so it's not clicking yet. But I said, what about the bone? Did you know, because I remember the x-ray and the bone was sticking out. Did you take care of the broken bone? And so she says, Dr. Brooks, she doesn't understand. And so he comes over and he says, you know, Lori, I'm really sorry, but we couldn't save it. We had to amputate. And I said, well, okay, I'll just, you know, fine, I'll ask you later, because I'm not, you know, I'm not clear, I'm not speaking. And then I cried, and I fortunately got back to sleep. But, sorry. By the next morning, I woke up and my head was a little clearer, and it's like 5:30 in the morning on a Monday, right? And trying to figure out what's going to happen next. They have told me I'm going to have to go in for another surgery. And I said, I have to call work. I left a bunch of stuff on my desk on Friday, and somebody's going to have to take care of it. Yeah. And my husband is looking at me like, you're nuts. And I said, no, I have to call work. And he said, well, won't be anybody there. I said, yes. For those of you who know Jen Smaller, I said, Jen's will be there. And he was. And so that's kind of how I started. You know, Don tried to tell him what was happening, and he couldn't get it out. So that's how I started, to inform people, you know, what had happened. And there's a lot of disbelief. People are like, no, you know, how could that be happening? But you know, it was part of my road to recovery, quite frankly, is when you have to explain to other people what happened. So I just want to tell you a couple other things really quick. I was in the hospital for 5 days, and during that time, Dr. Brooks would come around with his team, during rounds, and the first time he came in with his team, I could hear him talking about a stump, and I didn't know what they were talking about, and after they left, I said, I think they're referring to something on me as a stump, and that's just the term that they use for the residual limb, and I remember telling my husband, well, I don't want to be called a stump. I said, and I held my arm up, and it was pretty big at this time. It was really swollen. It's all bandaged up. It's this big white thing sticking out. And I said, it's just kind of stubby. It's not a stump. And that's how she got named. I still call her Stubby today. And people do ask me about how Stubby did when she's fine. And so when Dr. Brooks came around another time, I said, Dr. Brooks, I said, I know you refer to her as a stump, but I've named her Stubby. And he looked at me and he started smiling and he just said, you're gonna be just fine. And that too was just one of the steps, getting better. And so, I was there for 5 days. As time went on, they did realize I had a broken back, which is why my back was hurting. And they fitted me with a brace and sent me home. I felt very, very fortunate I was not paralyzed. I actually did have some paralysis initially. I didn't realize it. I had been laying, because you're in bed, everybody's worried about the arm because that's the trauma. But as I was laying in bed, sometimes I'd want to scooch around, a little bit, and I couldn't. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know why I couldn't do that. And they kept telling me, well, your back is a mess. It's just a mass of bruises. And then so when the x-ray got done on my back, I realized I had a broken back. It was they originally diagnosed it as a compression fracture. It turned out to be a burst fracture. I actually was relieved to know that there really was something wrong, that it wasn't just me losing my head. So I was in a back brace for 4 months, but like I said, I felt very fortunate not to have any permanent paralysis. And the hardest part, I think, when I got home was just starting to deal with getting my life back in order, day by day, one step at a time. But dealing with forever was really hard. I was never going to be the same again. And that part was tough. So one last story really quick. So denial is this thing we do for ourselves to avoid emotional trauma. And so after I was home for a couple days, I needed to go see my primary care physician because as I was changing out the bandage every day, I noticed that the incision looked like it might be getting a little bit of an infection. So I went to see him, and I'm sitting in the room, and he unwraps Stubby, and he says, oh, okay, yeah, you do have a little infection. Let me go get something. He comes back. But before he came back, I started crying, and my husband said, what's wrong? Did he hurt you? And I said, no. I said, it's so silly, but I actually thought when he unwrapped it, the hand would be there. I was just like, this is all going to be just a big mistake, and he was going to unwrap it, the hand would be there, and it would be fine again. But I realized I was in denial, and the hand was gone. But now I have Stubby. So anyway, that's my story. I wanted to share that with you, and I'm very thankful for all of you. The Rotary Club actually was a big support mechanism for me as I was recovering, and I really appreciate that. So have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Well, it's kind of tough to imagine what it's like going through something of that sort. But boy, we're just very happy that you came back together, and you've been a blessing to us in this club. And we have a lot to be thankful for. I know you know that, and we're thankful for you. Mr. Nop.
Well, good afternoon. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you about a little bit about my life story. I guess to truly appreciate life, you have to understand where you come from. And obviously, don't forget where you came from and how you got here today. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna highlight a little bit of my life story. And I got a list of items that I truly appreciate. The things that I truly appreciate today and for from here on in my life. Those of you know that in 1972 I was born into a slave labor camp in Cambodia. During that time, the population was 7 million people, of my people. And from 1972 to 1978, I lived in a slave labor camp where the 7 million population diminished to about 4.5 million people. So truly looking at it from a statistical standpoint, I was part of the 55% or 60% that lived. So pretty amazing in its own. So I lived in these treacherous conditions for about 6 years. I didn't have a lot of food to eat. I went to bed hungry every day. Came close to death many times. One time, my sister and I had to eat some skin of some potatoes that got really, really sick. We had blood coming out of our pores as a result of that. I stole everything I could. Every time they gave us a ration of food and to share with my family. And one of my greatest memories back in the slave labor camp was that the 3-inch scar that I bear on my chest every day. When I was about 5.5 years old, as we were eating in a mass tent in a slave labor camp, everything was dirt, poor, dilapidated buildings, nothing like you see here. Even our dilapidated building, it seems a lot nicer than what we have over there in Cambodia. As the food was running out, what happened was my parents worked for the Communist Party for the first 6 years of my life. We don't see them until in the evening. In the evening, you sit in a mass tent and you eat. So the children will sit with the children, the adults will sit with the adult. So they give you a little bit of food. As the food was running out, I dumped the remaining food onto my bowl. Next thing I knew, this kid jumped up and bit me. So I still bear that scar today, that to kind of make me remember how I got here and where I am now. So in 1978, going back for a little bit, we lived in that treacherous condition for about 6 years. In 1978, the Vietnamese people came and trying to invade their country or fought with the Khmer Rouge soldiers. Gave us an opportunity to take off. And we walked from Cambodia to Thailand when I was about 6.5 years old, and stayed on top of a mountaintop for several days before we crossed the border to Thailand. And the reason we did that was because if you get caught by the Thai soldiers at any point, they will shoot you right on the spot. So after spending several days there, I got lost at one point, and I stayed with the military people for about 4 days because of I did something wrong. My mom kept chasing me, and I kept going, and there's thousands and thousands of refugees. And mind you, there's no bathrooms anywhere, so everywhere you go, there are people going to the bathroom, you're walking barefoot, we had worms in our stomach, and we had everything you could imagine as a child. Crossing the border to Thailand, several days later, and registered ourselves in the refugee camp governed by the United Nations. Lived there for the next 4 years and keep passing several tests and before we made it to the Philippines in 1983. I still remember today how I earned my first American dollars. In the first camp that we stayed at, they had so many problems with rodents that the United Nations staff offer us for every 5 rats or mice that you kill, you get $1. I remember going through all these dilapidated buildings and chasing these rats and mice and whatnot and hit them with a stick. And when I got my 5, held on to the tails, waited in this long line in the middle of summer. I turned it in and finally got my first American dollar. I wish I kept that today. But in 1980, we made it out of Thailand after 4 or 5 refugee camps, made it to the Philippines, and lived there in a tropical forest for the next 8.5 months. And there we lived in a little bunker about 4 feet above ground. But it's the most amazing life that I could ever have. I went to school every morning with barefoot, carrying a little bowl with a little spoon. I went to class. I don't know I remember what I learned, but I just so looking forward to getting back home with my father. We made our own wooden gun with umbrella spoke and rubber band and our own goggles. We walked down to the stream every day, 4 to 5 hours a day. We spent the next 4 or 5 days hours a day, going to the stream, shooting the shrimp, fish, eel, and all that. We used to climb the mountains with our slippers, carrying 5 cans or 6 cans of rice with us on my waistband, tied it up there. Climb up the mountains and trade rice for potato. It was amazing. And then finally, in 1983, July 8, 1983, we finally got a chance to come to the United States of America. It was an amazing life just to be here. Once I got to the United States of America, we went into Tempe, Arizona, finally came to Stockton, California, where my father had a friend, and also we learned about the welfare system. That's why we came here. And because my parents didn't speak any English, my dad spoke a little bit of English, but my mom only attended 6 months of school in her whole entire life. So we couldn't make any money. So we came here, actually we came here 8 months later after we got in the United States. But going back a little bit, when we first got in the United States, I learned how to ride a girl's bicycle, a pink one at that, with 1 pedal. Once I got to learn how to ride that bicycle, I wanted to ride a bigger bicycle. So I learned how to ride a bigger bicycle, and from there, I start dumpster diving every day. I went into the garbage can, wake up 6 a.m. every morning, went into the big dumpster dive cans and looked for whatever I could find. I could not believe, I've always said this, I could not believe there's a lot of white people over there that threw all these things away. I'm like, oh my God, look at this beautiful plate they got in there. So anyhow, I dumpster dive every day before I went to school. And we finally came to Stockton, California in 1984. Went to school, start signing every piece of paperwork since 3rd grade. I didn't realize, what happened to my parents, but my mom and dad, basically were not there for us at all. My dad became a gambling addict, an alcoholic at one point. He's a lot better now. But I didn't realize why, because now you're looking back, he's looking at all the trauma, all the psychological warfare, and all the trauma they went through. That took a lot. So I started signing every piece of paperwork since 3rd grade, all the way through school, including getting my immigration for my green card, my U.S. citizens, and everything else. I learned how to forge my dad's signature. But the coolest thing is, when I cut class, I don't have to worry about it. No one's going to know. But even all that, at 16 years old, I remember one of the reasons why I became a police officer is because when I was about 15 years old, first of all, I worked out in the fields with the Mexicans as a child laborer. I went all the way to Oregon. I picked everything you could think of, cucumbers and potatoes and onions and garlic and peppers and raspberry, blackberries. I've done it all. The hardest work ever had always been cucumbers. When you as a child picking, you have to fill up the 5-gallon bucket and walk it down the road 2 buckets at a time. For 50 cents, that's amazingly hard work. So, did that. It took me several years to pass a written test into the police academy. It took me 4 years actually. Finally passed it by 3 points. Once I got in the police academy, we started with 67 and we graduated with 47. I was number 17 academically and number 2 in physical training throughout the entire year I was in the police academy while having a full-time job. And iron your clothes before you go to the class and all that. Through all that, before I became a police officer, I was accused of a drive-by shooting suspect while I was going to the police academy, and as a reserve police officer. My gun and badge was taken away from me for 6.5 months before I passed the lie detector test in Antioch during the application process. And when I was given that opportunity to go back to work as a reserve police officer. 6 months, once I got there for 6 months, once I started working there for 6 months at Stockton PD, I got hired here. So thanks to Chief Ron Scott. There he is. He's responsible for me being here today. Anyhow, through all that process, I've gone through divorce, fought for custody for my boys, whom I've raised the last 10 years on my own. At 2004, went back to school and got my degree from St. Mary's College while raising my 2 boys, while going through the divorce. While the divorce is with the boy's mom is a different person. So going through the divorce, and fighting for custody for the boys as well. So it took a lot, but I did it, and here we are today. An amazing life. So just a little bit of highlight. There's actually so much more I could tell you. I mean, even one of the trips where my dad was taken away from us for 8.5 months, we didn't know where he was during the killing fields, Cambodia, and we had to go look for him. And then one night, as we're walking, trekking along, we only had like 5 cans of rice, and the cattle ate. The ox ate the rest of the remaining rice that we had. And then we had to walk up and down the hills where my brother got really, really sick, and we all wished that he would die, but he wouldn't. He's still here today. It's amazing. But my sister had to carry him up and down the mountains, and once we got there, my mom left us for 2 days. To look for my father. She found him. When he came back, all he had was a towel on his back, because where he was taking a bath in the river. They bombed it. So, anyhow, I'm so very, very thankful today of being here in the United States of America. I got a list of items I'm going to share with you, and maybe you could take it with you as well, and start thinking about the things that we have here. Number one, what I'm so thankful for, my boys. They're truly healthy and amazing boys. They make me laugh and cry and happy at the same time. Pretty amazing. My boys are 15 and 17 years old today. They go to Granada High School. Love them to death. And number two is the opportunity of being a father. Growing up, I never got my questions answered. One of the greatest projects that we do for this club, by the way, is the dictionary project. I still have a dictionary that I stole from 3rd grade. I just confessed that to my 3rd grade teacher last year on her birthday. She said anybody who steals a dictionary is fine by me. I still have it. I didn't, one of the things you've got to understand is when you are a second language learner, when you go home, the learning stops. If I'm going to go to do my homework, who am I going to ask if no one in my house speaks English? So I have to do what I have to do in order to make it work for me. So I still have the dictionary at my home today. But just being a father, to be able to answer his questions, to be able to have a conversation with my boys, talk about books, talk about girls, it's amazing. My oldest still hugs me and kisses me. He shares his letter that he's written to, or girls have written him and whatnot. We have a pretty amazing relationship. My 15-year-old is coming around. He lost his head for a few months here. But I appreciate my family, particularly my mom and dad. For the longest time growing up, I really regretted my father, the fact that he was college educated in Cambodia. He was a teacher in Thailand. He could have done something with himself, but yet he became an alcoholic, a gambling addict and whatnot. And I forgot to tell you, another story was when I was 17 years old, I had to put my father in jail. He got really drunk and came after my mom with an axe. As a 17-year-old, I tackled my father, ripped the cord off the wall, tied him up, choked him out until the police showed up. That is just something you don't do in your family. But truly today, I appreciate my mom and my dad the most because of the sacrifice that they have given. What I realize now is that the sacrifice that they made was that to get us here to the promised land. Once they got us here, it didn't matter what happened. That was the best gift that they could give us. So it's up to me and my sibling to do what we need to do in order to be successful. And going back to Cambodia 3.5 years ago when I got to go back, I'm so appreciative because why is that? There's still no electricity where I was born. I saw a guy with a rake in his hand standing on the side of the river. I'm like, what the heck is that guy doing, Dad? He said, they dive down to the bottom of the lake, gouge the fresh dirt, and bring it back up. When they get it back up to the ground, to the floor level, they look for a fresh eel. That's how they still hunt today for food. Coffee. I never drank coffee before until about 7 years ago. It's all for social stuff. The human interaction, human connection. Bill knows this. You could find me at the Panama Red from Monday through Friday, and sometimes Saturday and Sunday from 8 to 9 every day. most of my friends are all retirees from UPS and firefighters and whatnot. I love hanging out with them. We get an opportunity to BS that nobody can. It's such a great interaction. You know, we all look for that connection. I have that with these guys, and I just love it. Love going to the coffee shop every morning and just being able to talk to people about different things in life. Water. Oh my gosh, I so appreciate water. Still every morning when I get up, you know, when we turn on the faucet, I'm like, oh my gosh, Moni, turn that damn thing off, because why is we're wasting so much water? In Thailand, they gave us a 5-gallon bucket to bathe ourselves. And at times, we have to cross the border from the United Nations camp. And the reason what makes a huge difference is when you're inside a United Nations camp, the camp is governed by United Nations laws. If you step out, it's governed by the Thai law. They'll beat the heck out of you if they have to. But sometimes we have to walk miles just to get water. So I truly appreciate water. Number 6 items on my list is my board of directors for my Mony Nop Foundation. I have 14 unselfish people helping me for the goods of children. We're going to do some amazing things in this community. You're going to hear a lot more about it, and this is going to get done one way or the other. My St. Mary's College degree. Oh my gosh, when I got my degree, I never knew I didn't know so much. Now I love to read. I can't stop picking up a magazine or something to read. I just love it in my bathroom or in my bedroom or whatever. It doesn't matter where, I have something to read all the time. St. Mary's College, you know, opened up a whole new world to me that I never knew before. Amazing. I'll never forget the Lasayan spirit. That is, enter to learn, leave to serve. I never forgot that. My friends, oh my gosh, it's the most amazing thing. I have 2,796 people on my phone. And that's just the people that I put on my phone so far. And I can tell you this, not one person in this room or on my phone would be willing, you know, would say no to me if I need help, if I could just call and ask. Not one person, not in this room or other people on my phone. That's amazing. That's amazing. So friends are so